Good morning, everybody. Carmen here, or I guess it might not be morning for you, but if you're watching this live, we do this series every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So today we are going to talk about how do I know when to use that specialty foot. So most of you probably have a sewing machine, and your sewing machine comes with a lot of different feet. If you're curious what those do for you, I have actually made a previous How Do I video on how to use those feet that came with your sewing machine. So most of the standard feet that we use day in and day out already are coming with our sewing machines, which is pretty amazing because it's great to have all the things that we need at our fingertips. But sometimes we run into problems or we're doing a specialty technique, and then there are tons of different specialty feet, like at least 30 per manufacturer, probably even more than that. There's probably like 50 different specialty feet out there, and I'm just sort of picking numbers, but there are a lot of them. Every brand makes different specialty feet for their machines, and a lot of the specialty feet, like the ones that we're going to talk about today, most brands have these feet. So I'm showing today the feet I'm going to show are going to be on this brother here, and I'm just using snap-on feet. But most of the feet that I'm showing, the snap-on version, work on the baby lock machines. They're going to work on many other machines that have snap-ons. Bernina has a whole line of feet. Janome, Juki, Pfaff and Viking, all of the major brands have feet that you can choose from. So today I just picked a couple of my favorites, and I will probably another time pick a couple different ones and show you what they do, because it's nice to know what the different feet that are out there, what they do for you, so if you run into one of these problems, you can resolve them. So the first foot I'm going to talk about is, actually started with this over here. I think the first foot we'll talk about is the Teflon foot. So this is the Teflon foot, and it's called the Teflon foot, or it's called the non-stick foot. And what is unique about this foot is it has an anti-slip back on it. So where this is great, and of course I've already dropped things, is if you have ever been sewing on vinyls, leathers, corks, any of those materials where it feels like as you're sewing, like if we were going to sew over this vinyl here, we'll just go to our straight stitch, right? Sometimes it will feel like the vinyl is pulling on your actual, cut this thread, is pulling on your actual fabric and making it so your feed dogs can't pull forward as much. And if you ever have that, this foot is going to prevent that. I definitely went through a phase where I was making lots of faux leather bracelets, and this foot was so helpful. So it's still going to work the same, but what this foot does for you is it makes it so it can glide over these fabrics that are sort of sticky, whether that be a vinyl like this or a cork like this. So if you have or leather, if you have any of those things and you are just finding that it is super sticky, then try the Teflon foot. The other tip when you're working on some of those vinyls or leathers or any of those things is making sure that you're using the right needle. And if all of a sudden your needle starts skipping stitches, it means that needle has become dull, and some fabrics just dull needles way faster. Typically you want to change your needle every 8 hours of sewing, but I have found with some of these synthetic-y fabrics, some faux leathers, vinyls, those sorts of things, that they will dull the needle really fast, and as soon as you start skipping stitches, put a new needle in paired with this foot and you're not going to have any problems. Okay, so that is the Teflon non-stick foot. Put that over here. The other foot I want to show you is the BiLevel Foot. So this foot is sort of cool. It has a ridge on the bottom. And so what this foot is designed for is particularly those times when you're top stitching or you're doing something like, this is a beautiful apron that a customer made me. Always more fun together. I wore it actually during our summer camp program if you came to that. But this is a really cute apron, and there's definitely been some top stitching done here, right? Where you're going to have lots of thick, you'll have some thick points, and then you have some, finer points. So if, let's say we were if for whatever reason we wanted to sew this pocket together, right, onto this, if you were to use a standard sewing foot, it is not level, right? So you can sort of see how it bends down like this. But if you were to use this guy, you could get it lined up. So this little groove here is sort of right around that edge. So now your foot can be level. And so that is where you might use a BiLevel foot. Anytime you are, oftentimes it's going to happen when you're top stitching or when you're doing something that's already constructed and you have the bump of the seam. There's a BiLevel foot, and a couple brands make them both for left BiLevel, right BiLevel. So depending on which side this groove is on, to allow you then to, like if we were really going to sew this, oh, got to snap my foot all the way on. There we go. Now it's on. If we were really going to sew this, you can see that because of that little groove now, this would stay totally flat, and it's going to make it stay flat as I start sewing. As I start sewing it, right? And so I'm not going to actually sew it because I don't really want to sew my pocket. I just sort of wanted to show you the example of a time when you would use a BiLevel foot. Or if you ever run into a project where, let's say you're doing a lot of sewing and it's uneven, this foot could resolve that for you. And so then that way the stitch will remain straighter and more consistent. Because as we all know, if the foot's a little bit wonky, if everything's a little bit wonky, then sometimes your stitch is wonky. Okay, next one.
So Lois said she's never used a Teflon foot, but she's going to use it today.
Okay, give it a try, Lois. Let us know how it works. That's awesome. Okay, the next foot is the edge joining foot. Now, this foot has been around for a while. Some of these feet, like the BiLevel foot, is really pretty new. I would say they've only been on the market for like 5 years, which I know that isn't maybe new, but in the sewing world, where we've had a straight stitch sewing foot for a long time, right? 5 years is pretty new. So this guy has been around for quite a while, and he has a lot of functions. So the way that this foot is designed is it has this flange here, and you can see that this flange allows you to line things up. It's very similar to a stitch in the ditch foot, but the difference is that this has room that you can do a zigzag. Okay, so it allows you to have a zigzag, and it lines up just a little bit differently. Before we had a stitch in the ditch foot, this is honestly what we use to do stitch in the ditch, but the stitch in the ditch foot works a little better for quilting. If you're not familiar with the term stitch in the ditch, what I'm referencing is when you have a quilt and you already have it, like let's say I had already sewn these, I should have actually had an example, but that's okay. If you had already sewn these two together, right, and this was your quilt, and you wanted to stitch in this ditch, there is a foot called the stitch in the ditch foot where it keeps the guide and it lines up right along here so you can stay right in that little seam. And this was sort of the precursor foot to that, but it has a zigzag and it has some more functions than just a stitch in the ditch foot. So this is called the edge joining foot. So there's a couple of functions here. So one, if you just wanted to take any two pieces of fabric, we'll just grab these two here. If you wanted to take any two pieces of fabric together and sew them together here, you would line them up so the little flange is in between the two pieces, and then you would go pick, I'm just gonna pick a little zigzag, and I'm gonna hit start, and it's just gonna go forwards and backwards here, or I guess side to side really, and it's going to keep it lined up and stitch it together, but I didn't have it quite lined up right, guys. Did you see that? Maybe, what do you guys think? Should I make my stitch a little bit wider? I think I need a wider stitch. Has this happened to you? These sorts of things always happen to me, which is how you learn, right? So luckily I'm just on test fabric. So if you were really gonna do this at home, you want to, I would always test out your stitch width, particularly when you're doing something like joining two pieces of fabric. So let's make my stitch width bigger. This machine allows me to make my width quite a bit bigger. You can see it changing here, right? Because it was really down at 3.5. 6 is probably going to be maybe bigger than I want, but we'll just give it a try. We know it'll catch it though. So you can see now how much more it's really going over to that edge there. Oh yeah, lower my presser foot. Pull this off, and you can see now that it has joined those together. But what's great about this foot is it helps it keep it all lined up for you so you don't have to use pins. And then this was really the right width. That first width I had, I think, was 3.5 millimeters, and now this is a 6 millimeter stitch, and that is working well. Now there is a time when you might want to use a really tiny stitch. So sometimes you might have ribbon or lace or something that you want to attach to an edge. And this can be another time that using this edge joining foot can work really well. And this actually might be a case where having a little bit shorter stitch length might work pretty well. So I will try it with 4 here and see how it goes. And so I am just going to start here, and you can see then it's actually grabbing the edge of the fabric. Let's just cut this here and go down. It's grabbing the edge of that lace and pulling it in. Actually, see how it grabbed too much there? We really want this, and I tested this one I actually played with earlier. The 3 millimeters was really the right, that 3.5 was really the right thing, because it just grabbed the edge of my lace. Stop it here, cut those threads. Because when you only have a very narrow stitch, now can you see how great that is? It just attached it. So if I had been using red thread, you wouldn't really see it. Or you could have used white thread if you wanted it to look like the ribbon, but this can be another way to attach to your fabric. And so you can sort of see the difference here, where with this foot, you're gonna really play with that stitch width, right? Because our first example over here, I used a stitch that was too narrow to start with, right? So it had to be wider, so I had to do a 6 millimeter. This one, doing a 3.5 or even a 3, narrow is what I want, because all I want that stitch to be doing is just grabbing the edge of the ribbon as it attaches to my fabric. And so once again, this is the edge joining foot, and you can do lots of different things with this, whether it be adding a little ribbon to the end of a tea towel or something, or you want to attach 2 pieces of fabric together. Or, you know, I actually use this a lot when I'm fixing like jeans or things that have like a hole in them that I want to just darn, right? It's a great way to help keep it lined up and grab both sides for darning. So that is the edge joining foot. Okay, finally we have one more. This guy is the open toe foot. The open toe foot is an awesome foot. It is, you know, when you compare it to like a standard sewing foot, you can see that its toe is totally open, right? Compared to this guy that has the plastic and the metal there. So open toe is great for a couple of different things. One, we're gonna go over here, and I think we'll go to character decorative stitches. And we're gonna go see what stitch we want here. Maybe I was trying to do a blanket stitch or something. You could grab a blanket stitch, or maybe I just want to do, a little decorative stitch. We'll go back to character decorative stitch. Whatever it is, maybe I just want to do this little guy here. I'm not gonna be too dense. Let's just go here. Let's clear out here. Go back there and grab that guy. Okay, so we are just gonna do this little feather stitch. Now my machine is recommending my end foot. It's really lovely how, you know, this machine can tell you lots of the different things. You know, it tells you what foot to use. A lot of machines do that. This is also where I can adjust. I don't know how many of you have noticed that my presser foot keeps stopping in the up position, but it's not cutting my threads. So I'm just gonna tell it to cut my threads, because then now it should cut my threads when I stop, which will be better as long as I tap my reverse button. And I can also tell it if I want this machine to always stop in the needle down position with the presser foot raised. So there's some nice quick keys here, and a lot of machines have those. So let's see here. So what's great about this foot is that now we're pretending I'm appliquing or something here, right? I've already attached this heart, and if, let's say, I want to just follow along this edge because I'm attaching this, right? I'm probably going to slow my machine down, because I find that if I'm going a little slower when I'm doing applique, it's better, because particularly if I have to deal with a curve and I need to pause and things. So you can see that where that red line is, it's going to stay, that's where the center of my needle is going to be. And so here, if I'm just You can really see what you're doing though to keep that red line lined up to the edge of that heart, right? So that way we are doing this really nice little applique stitch all the way down, and you can really see what you're doing. So we're just going to tap my reverse button here so it ties it off for me and cuts my threads and raises my presser foot since we set that up. And you can see here how it just stayed right in line there because I was able to use the foot here to keep it as I went along, right? I could keep that little red part just lined up to the edge. So that is one use for an open toe foot. The other time that I will use an open toe foot is if, let's say, I'm quilting or really any time that I just want to see what I'm doing. Like, let's say I was just wanting to do a straight stitch here. Let's go back to my straight stitch. Okay, delete my pattern. We'll go back to my straight stitch in the center needle position. And I'm going to start here. If, let's say I'm doing something where I've chosen that I want to meander around a pattern or something, right? I can see a whole lot better where I'm driving because it is an open toe foot, right? Because I was able to see exactly what I was stitching on without ever wondering because my foot is an open toe foot, which is super handy. So that is another place where I might use an open toe foot. And then finally, another place I sometimes will use open toe feet is if I am doing just a decorative stitch. And, you know, if I was just going to do a decorative stitch along here or along somewhere, maybe even lined up on an edge of something, this would just allow me to see better. Anytime I want to see more of what I'm doing, I'm going to use my open toe foot. So this and these open toe foot, they come in a couple of different ways. So for instance, with FOF machines, most mini FOF machines are 9mm machines. And what I mean by that is the opening here is 9mm. So it's a little bit bigger. This is a 7mm machine, and the FOF is 9mm, but they make an open toe foot in both 6mm and in 9mm. So sometimes a 6mm can be nice if you're going to do a smaller decorative stitch because you get a little bit more stabilization because the foot's not quite as big. And 9mm, of course, is great if you're going to be doing really wide stitches. This one here is a 7mm open toe foot because this works with the Brother and Baby Lock machines. And these come in the total clear plastic, and some of them are also metal. So it just sort of depends on your personal preference. I sort of like the clear plastic just because you can see more. So you just get to see lots of things, but the metal ones work great as well. So those were I made a big mess back there today. Those were the feet that I wanted to share with you today. There are literally tons and tons of feet. I would love to know from you what feet are feet that you would love to learn more about, and then I could show them how they work. There's beading feet, there's bias binding feet, there's all tons of different quilting feet, you know, out there that all have different applications. There's ruler feet. There's really, if you can think of an application in sewing, there's probably a foot that can help you with it. So if you have any questions or anything, please throw them in our comments on Facebook, and we'll use that to create future videos. And we look forward to seeing you soon. If you're curious about any of these feet, we do stock most of these feet in all of our quality sewing stores in Washington State, and then we also have them on our website. Thanks so much, and have fun sewing.